Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. I'd like to thank His Excellency Matar Al-Tayer of the RTA, His Excellency Saeed Al-Tayer of DIWA, and His Excellency Muhammad Alabar of EMAR, the organizers of this conference. It is truly an honor to represent PMI and to talk about a very important subject, project management, program management, the role in helping organizations implement their strategies. We've heard already excellent examples of the leadership of organizations from the highest levels, recognizing that project management is in fact critical to their success in making change and difference in their communities and the projects that they seek to implement. One of the things that we've talked a lot about is that the rate of change is accelerating. We not only do individuals work in an organization context, but organizations also operate and perform in a context, and that context is forever more volatile, fast-paced, rapidly changing, uncertain, in an economy that is structurally uncertain. To illustrate that, you can see rampant change in the acceleration of the application for patents in the United States as an example of those organizations seeking to innovate, to capture market share, to grow, to make a difference. The CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, was quoted as saying that we now create more information every 2 days than we did from the dawn of time until 2003. Now, I know some have challenged that, but the reality is technology is not only changing itself, but is enabling organizations and societies to change, and that rampant increase in speed is causing organizations and individuals that practice project management to have to adapt. Here in Dubai, the GDP and the population continues to accelerate at a similarly rapid pace, and is putting immense challenges to organizations to continue to deliver value for them. And perhaps as a proxy for the project management profession, this graphic demonstrates PMI's own membership growth as it matches the growth and the interest of project management worldwide. PMI was founded just over 40 years ago and now has over 450,000 members and represents 1 million members and certified professionals in over 180 countries. So the rapid change in the world, in the business economy, and in organizations has to be matched with changes in project management and the capability that organizations are trying to implement and sustain. Part of that is tied to strategic initiatives and the role that project management and program management, as well as PMOs, can play to support organizations. One of the things that PMI does is produce significant research in the areas of trends and practices on project management. Last year, we sponsored research with the Economist Intelligence Unit on why good strategies fail. And we asked globally CEOs all over the world whether they thought strategy implementation was important. They recognized that strategy development was important, but we wanted to know, did they think that strategy implementation was important? And not surprisingly, 88% thought that strategy implementation was important. I'm not sure what the other 12% were thinking, but 88% thought it was important. We asked the same executives whether they were good at it, and 61% acknowledged that they struggled with implementing the strategy. So they felt they were strong in developing strategy, but there was a significant disconnect between their own capability and success in implementing that strategy. And finally, and most surprisingly, 17% stated that they thought strategy implementation was strategic. That meant that 83% thought it was tactical or something else. So if you believed in your strategy and the strategy to development, and you wanted to see it come to fruition and be implemented, only 17% thought it was strategic. It's no wonder that 56% of strategic initiatives then met their goals or original business intent. Nearly 1 in 2 failed to meet the original goal intended by the strategy. So it's not an importance thing. 88% felt it was important. It's not an awareness. 61% acknowledged that they struggled with it. But it may be the emphasis that they've placed on it and the leadership that's demonstrated in their organizations. And PMOs in particular will play an important role to help organizations realize their strategy. In that same study, there was a quote that was captured. I thought it was very important to understand that in this ever-advancing technological era. Roland Pond, who's the Director of Strategy of Skype, commented that the ability to sustain lasting strategic insights will become more difficult over time. Everyone has access to information. New technologies become cheaper, and more people can access them at quicker rates and adopt them and use them in developing and implementing their strategy. So what will become more important may be other things like execution. And this is really the fundamental role that project and program management plays, and the role that PMOs, project management offices, program management offices can and should play for organizations. But they are challenged too. One of the things we found in the study is that language influences behavior. So if organizations are thinking of strategy implementation as tactical or not strategic, it's possibly because as project and program management professionals, we talk in a language that does not connect to executive leaders. So PMI, the practitioners we represent, and the organizations that use project management speak about project management in very technical PM terms. So things like schedule management, cost performance indices, schedule performance indices, work breakdown structures, all essential tools in project management and successful project management, but not words or language that executives and organizations can connect to. So we have to close that language gap as part of it. So we need to communicate differently with each other. But we also have to change the focus of project management and the focus of PMOs in the future to be more successful. The current state of PMOs really recognizes this, or we see that. We've historically been fundamentally focused across things like tracking performance metrics, absolutely critical to project success. But if we're speaking to executives, those that are making decisions, those that will provide the resources for projects and programs, we have to talk about projects and programs in a different language. We have a heavy process focus and orientation, and that's also okay, except that organization leaders don't connect to that process because they're doing something else. Folks currently on reporting project and program focus versus maybe a more strategic focus or value focus. So PMOs today have an opportunity to work across 4 very important related imperatives that will change the focus and success of not only project management in the organization, but also the project management office. And they're focusing on critical initiatives, instituting smart and simple processes, encouraging a culture of change, and fostering talent and building capabilities. I'm going to step through each of these. Imperative number 1, focus on critical initiatives. PMIs current state, provide too little or too much information to organization decision makers and leaders making the critical decision around where to invest and where to put the focus of resources in the organization. Because clearly there's always more opportunity in organizations than there is resources in a particular time. They also don't necessarily connect to value. Right? So we talk about project in terms of activities and milestones, but not necessarily the ultimate value that the project will deliver. So the opportunity exists for PMOs to focus on portfolio management. Some PMOs today have that opportunity, have that function, have that responsibility, have that accountability. We heard today in RTA that they have a portfolio management process. And the corporate PMO is responsible for help facilitating that. But our own research demonstrates that they don't have that across most PMOs. So that having portfolio, looking at investment and balancing it with risk, ultimately with reward, the organization has the opportunity, the PMO organization has the opportunity to become more strategic in the eyes of those that will ultimately be the sponsor, those that will benefit from it. They also have the opportunity to help the organization become more agile. And this is an important aspect of making a transition in that volatile world that I described earlier. Project management is often labeled with or perceived as operating slowly, right? So we need to do certain things, we need to have certain activities and tasks presented and accomplished, but it actually has the opportunity to accelerate the organization agility. We know that organizations that are more agile, that can take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves, complete their strategic initiatives more successfully than those that don't. One of the things that we identified in a PMI's Pulse of the Profession research, the in-depth study on organization agility, was that counter to the current thinking of project management, which is that standardization would slow down innovation, growth, or an organization's ability to be more agile, we actually found in the research that standardization was absolutely critical to the success of an organization becoming more agile. Organizations that were more agile implemented risk management and change management practices more consistently. They standardized their focus. They were able to monitor and act, and that was the key differentiation for those organizations. Many organizations have embedded in it risk management practices where they track and log and register the risks. But it's the organizations that found a way to be more agile, or to be more agile, they found a way to act on those risks more quickly than other organizations. Part of that was through standardization, part of that was through change and risk management, and part of that was how they were organized. They embedded in it the practices of risk management, change management, in their project management organization, in their PMO, and the organization had a connection to the decision makers that they could help inform those. I was glad to see NASA present today, just about 2 weeks ago. I was in NASA's office, and we're talking about risk-informed decisions, right? So, and risk-informed priorities. These organizations make decisions quickly because they understand the risks. The decisions are informed by risk. They understand the opportunity, and they understand through portfolio the trade-off between investment and the risk that they are assuming. And PMOs and project management can play a significant role in that they don't necessarily do today. The other thing that we identified as part of this is the concept of roadmaps. So we know in project management artifacts there's significant history of activities, milestones that are absolutely essential to identify in work breakdown structures, translated into a schedule, and met for the success of the project. But in communicating to those that are making the decisions around where to invest, it's essential, we found in the research in PMOs, to limit it to a critical number of milestones. We partnered with Boston Consulting Group in the Capstone report for our PMO Thought Leadership series last year, and they identified that a roadmap identifying, it's 10 to 25, depending on the significance and complexity of the project, critical milestones that were essential to communicate the status of the project, because what we found is executives are also sponsoring multiple projects or programs, and their ability to absorb and understand the deep level of milestones necessary for a project or program manager to understand and manage was different. And having a focus on 10 to 25 per major strategic program was the best way to inform the decision-making of the organization. So in a future state, PMOs would be less process-focused and be more forward-looking through the delivery of information that actually had insight into the strategic impact of the project or program that was being developed. The second imperative, rather, is instituting smart and simple processes. So today, PMOs are focused on process, largely identified, and also policing that process. Many PMOs have been identified in organizations as too focused on making sure that we tick the box. We actually completed a particular milestone or artifact and taking claim over the process versus ultimately perhaps the outcome. And that's a challenge for organizations because they often look for the easiest way to implement project management, but it takes significant amount of understanding from the senior level of organizations to be successful. So from a PMO perspective, alignment and advanced tactical are the two labels that I would use. When I talk about alignment, I'm not speaking of strategic alignment as I was in portfolio management. Project and programs must maintain alignment to the longer-term strategy of the organization. They absolutely have to maintain that. Here I'm talking about the PMO's alignment within the organization. We've done other research on PMOs that identify that many PMOs are organized but the organization doesn't really understand from where they were organized. So they exist, someone maybe perhaps started it at a very grassroots level, but they don't really have a clear strategic alignment within their organization. We heard great examples today where it's very clear that the most senior leadership of the organization understands project and program management, the value to the organization, and they've been the sponsor of PMOs. In many organizations, they're not the sponsor of PMOs. In fact, many organizations have PMOs and they're not even aware of it. I can tell you of an organization, it's number one in its market, in its particular region. It has a $150 billion market capitalization. They actually were unable to tell me the number of PMOs they had. They formed a corporate PMO. And then privately, one of the senior leaders of the organization pulled me aside in a conference room and said, we have all these PMOs, we're not sure how many. The answer was close to 400. They said, we formed a corporate PMO or enterprise PMO, but we don't really understand why, and by the way, none of us pay attention to it. So you think about an organization, a PMO. If I were working in a PMO, I want to make sure that my alignment to the long-term strategic mission of the organization is very clear. And it's not always the case in organizations, because project managers need a way to organize and structure around delivery of major projects and programs, and sometimes it starts at a grassroots or a business unit level, but it's not ultimately supported and integrated into longer-term strategic alignment. And advanced tactical, many PMOs and project managers are focused on solving the problems of today and perhaps more troubling, the problems of last 1 to 2 years. So we have project management experiences, we capture lessons learned, we incorporate those lessons learned, and we seek to solve them today. Strategic PMOs focus on the next 3 to 5 years. So we heard a lot about vision this afternoon and this morning. So having a long-term vision and making sure that the major projects and programs support that long-term vision. Likewise, the PMO should be forward-thinking. They can still focus on the critical aspects of project and program management, but it has to be with a view to be prepared for the next 3 to 5 years. PMI maintains a global executive council of which RTA is a member, and one of our other council members started to talk about how they were not only planning for, again, strategies, they're actually hiring project managers against strategies versus current project portfolio. So if they have a longer term strategy to be sustainable, for instance, what we've heard just recently in this past panel, they're focusing on hiring the right project and program managers, and I'll talk a little bit about talent in a second. But they're also organizing the PMO to support the longer-term strategies. The concept of rigor tests came out, and minimum sufficiency came out in our PMO research as well. And this is really the opportunity for project and program managers and really the PMO leadership to focus on rigor testing the critical milestones in the roadmap that I identified earlier. So it's essential that they challenge up front the milestones that were developed, working with their senior leadership. And the PMOs are well placed and positioned. In fact, they're almost uniquely positioned and focused to play a critical role in testing the assumptions that are in the milestones on the roadmap with senior leadership, with the ability to adjust at the time that's needed. We had another council member who was a large engineering procurement and construction manager, and they talked about these major linear construction projects. And they know from experience that they will have to course correct at least twice in the life cycle of every major program. They'll know that something has changed and there's an early correction that takes place. And then later in the program, years into it, there's an opportunity to come back and course correct because there's a fatigue that takes place in the project team, and they need to come back. And the roadmap that they developed, they know this from a similar concept of rigor testing the roadmap. They know that at certain points they're going to experience that, and they will need to course correct, make changes in resources, trade out resources, team members, but it comes from a maturity of the project and program management office that enables organizations to do that. So the idea is minimum sufficiency. So just the right amount of process and behaviors to be successful, limiting the amount of information that flows to the senior executives, to the leaders of the organization that are making the decisions, that have to support the project or program longer term, provide the resources. So the concept of minimum sufficiency really comes down to having the right amount of information that's only necessary to be successful. So in a SIM world, strategic initiative management, the PMO focuses on that sufficiency in order to drive progress, and I would add to drive progress towards strategic completion, or to strategic value to be completed. Not just the milestones captured in activities and schedules, but ultimately with a view towards the value that was intended by the project or program. Imperative 3 is around encouraging a culture of change, and this is absolutely essential to organizations and something that PMI is focused on for at least 5 to 10 years. And that is, we formally call this a culture of project management, because we know that all change in organizations happens through projects and programs. Whether the organization refers to them as project or programs is really how they characterize it in their organization. But we know that if I have a strategy, if I have a strategic plan, and identify strategic initiatives, in the end, they're implemented through projects and programs. So in today's world, PMOs have limited alignment, connection to strategy. Sometimes they don't have visibility to strategy. Often a question that's asked is, when do you bring the project management leader into the project? Some will tell you that they still today have a struggle in getting project management leadership into the early part of the project, at the time they're making that portfolio decision to implement the particular project or program. One of the things that we find as, I want to call it a solution to it, but an absolutely critical imperative, is an engaged executive sponsor. And I was excited to hear all the earlier sessions that went before me, because I knew that I would hear great examples of incredible executive sponsorship, support from the highest levels of the organization. I know that intuitively, I know that anecdotally, I know that from working together with organizations like RTA and DWA and EMAR. But I know in other organizations it's not true. So I asked my research team to do actually they did a multivariate regression analysis of all the research of PMI. And they identified that the single most important success criteria for projects is an engaged executive sponsor, because the role of the sponsor becomes critical. You can see some of the differences in terms of the performance. Those that have engaged executive sponsor 80% or more of the time have a 77% success rate in meeting their original goals and business intent, and those that have it just less than 50%, under 50%. So there's a significant benefit derived from having an engaged sponsor, and I think you heard really good, vivid examples today from the sponsors themselves. But the challenge in many organizations, we found in the research, is that sponsors are very busy. Just like the project or program manager, the sponsors are busy. They average, on average, sponsor 2.5 roughly projects at the same time. They estimate about 13 hours per project, so roughly 34 hours a week a sponsor plays a role sponsoring a project. That's in conjunction or in addition to their functional role. So if it's a senior financial official in your organization sponsoring multiple projects, they could be spending as much as 34% or 34 hours a week sponsoring a project in addition to whatever it is they're also responsible for. So what we find is that they're overextended, and that creates a problem in organizations. But PMOs, through some of the other imperatives, and I mentioned these are interrelated and linked, through some of the other imperatives, can reduce the amount of information, can be more strategically focused, can communicate in a different way around projects and programs to enable the sponsor to be more effective. One of the things we found identified as well in the research is the most important actions, if you will, for an executive sponsor. I just want to highlight a couple that have come through many times to us in working with organizations. Clearing roadblocks. So in mature organizations and project management understand that there will be challenges in the project. They don't expect perfection at every step of the way. So they understand that, and the role of the sponsor, it's essential that they remove obstacles and roadblocks to the success of the project. It could include making sure resources are available or more resources are available. It could be a decision-making cycle. I mentioned organization agility earlier. One of the key practices in organization agility is shortening the decision-making cycle. So sponsors play a critical role in getting the decision made at the right time and getting the resources to the team at the time that they need it. Also, they need to champion the project with senior management if they're not already a member of senior management. And that comes through really a focus on communicating the case for change. So the case for change on a project really speaks to the benefits of the project. Many sponsors are assigned project sponsorship or assume it at the beginning of the project. They sign their name, they stand up, they charter the project, and then they disappear. Not literally, but they kind of go back to what it is they do for the majority of their job and forget about their sponsorship activities. But engaged, active sponsors champion the case for change throughout the project. They communicate with key stakeholder groups. If it's a major infrastructure project like a metro, they're out there in the community communicating to not just the riders and to the citizens, but also all the communities that are affected or impacted. That's significant in terms of the ultimate success rate of the project. Those that do it and do it well have greater success. Those that don't struggle with the ultimate implementation and seeing the value in the major project. So in a strategic initiative management world where project and program management and PMOs are more aligned to strategy and the ultimate benefit and value, PMOs can establish a clear alignment with strategic objectives and enable senior leaders to be accountable for the change, not only be accountable, but to help champion the change in organizations, to be better, active, engaged sponsors. And the fourth imperative is an important one, and we've heard a lot about that today as well, which is to foster talent and build capabilities. So talent management is something that PMI has focused on since its inception. We have focused for over 40 years on helping individual project and program managers develop their competencies, skills, and behaviors to enable project management success. PMOs have that same opportunity. But today, not universally, but today many PMOs are focused on just focus on one side of what's necessary for organization, one aspect, and that's the technical project management skills, developing work breakdown structures, translating those into a schedule, cost estimation, absolutely essential. But it's no longer enough, and I think we've heard a lot of that today in the presentations. PMI has started using, actually as far back as 2010, we started using a triangle, we call now the talent triangle, to graphically represent what organizations need in terms of developing their project and program managers and what individuals need to focus on to be more successful. So it includes technical project management skills. So those that I've already talked about, schedule management, budget management, cost estimation, all the project management artifacts. But also leadership and strategic and business management skills. So on the leadership side, we would include things like negotiation, conflict resolution, organization change management. These are essential skills. We heard earlier from NASA, from Brian, emotional intelligence. That's another way to capture leadership skills in terms of what you need from a skills, behaviors, and competencies profile. And then strategic and business management skills. For major, if I used infrastructure projects as an example, commercial capability would fall into the business management side. Do you understand the commercial capability of the particular project or program? And can you actually help the organization deliver the project more successfully because you're managing that aspect of the project versus having a lower awareness or capability in that area? So it takes all three of these areas, and what's key for organizations is that they understand which is more essential for their organization or their project at a particular time, and then that they match that to an individual or individuals that can support that. We asked in our in-depth study on talent management what was the most important and what was the, and they also identified that the technical skills were hardest to find but easiest to teach. We thought that was interesting, but what they identified, and not surprisingly from what you heard today, which were again vivid examples of the leadership needed in major programs, was that 2/3 of the organization said that leadership skills are not as teachable, but they're also the most important for early project success. So if an organization or a PMO focus solely on developing the technical side of the profile of project and program managers necessary, they'll be less successful than those that focus against all three. And as importantly, organizations, as they look to recruit more project and program managers from within the organization or outside the organization, need to think about whether they should be recruiting from the technical side of professions, or whether maybe there's an opportunity to recruit from those that have demonstrated leadership and ultimately and teach them or incorporate the other two sides or two domains in terms of development. This is an important aspect for project and program management. We heard from a PMO, and that's from the actual practitioner standpoint. From a PMO leadership standpoint, what we found in our research that I mentioned last year is that PMO leaders have to be part evangelist, therapist, and part coach. And that was a quote from Forrester, who helped collaborate with our research on that. But I think it demonstrates in a different way the three aspects of the talent triangle. All right, so you have to be able to communicate on the leadership side. You have to be able to coach and mentor on the leadership side. But we still know that sound, fundamental technical skills are essential to project success. You cannot be successful without them, but it takes more, and technical skills alone are not enough. So PMOs rather, in a strategic initiative management world, focus on all sides of the talent triangle. They're no longer focused on just one, the technical, as they have been in the past, but they've incorporated the other two areas of focus into their training and development, into their career path, into the descriptions of project and program managers. I can tell you that today, just within the last month, major global organizations are implementing this focus, some specifically in the graphic of a talent triangle, because it does resonate with project managers from a triple constraint standpoint. It's a familiar graphic, but organizations are incorporating this profile for project and program managers into their career paths in the organization, and developing academies and training that are aligned to and give them opportunities to develop against all three sides of the talent triangle, including experiential learning, training and development, internal and external. The one thing I also want to cover, which is outside but very important to the four imperatives, is yesterday we heard in an executive roundtable a quote, or at least it's a quote I took away from it, which is, "We wouldn't do the project or program if there was no value." So implicit in everything we do is there's value to be delivered in an organization. So in a strategic initiative management world, the alignment from the highest level strategy or vision, say for Dubai that we've heard throughout today's proceedings, or if you're in the private sector in an organization, the long-term strategy, the change that we seek to implement, there's implicit in that the value. In a strategic initiative management focus, the value becomes the center of focus. So we're no longer speaking just about a particular project A or project B or a program of projects. We're focused on the delivery of value, and that comes through a process that's largely called benefits realization that you're familiar with, but is as elusive as any other ideal in terms of project management. Many organizations report that they have difficulty in benefits realization, identifying the benefits. And what we found in some research a couple years ago is that organizations with mature benefits realization do these things. They identify the expected outcomes before the project starts. So I have the opportunity in my role to speak to organizations around the world on a monthly basis, and many of them focus on benefits realization after and only after the project closes. So they did not think about identifying the benefits early on in the project, so they have far less likelihood of ever achieving the benefits, let alone recognize them after the project's closed. Organizations that are mature identify the benefits for the project upfront. They assign them by stakeholder group, and they assign accountability for the benefits to individuals on the project team or throughout the organization. And they're responsible to monitor and assess those throughout and identify risks or challenges to them. So benefits realization is not a lessons learned activity. It doesn't happen at the end of the project, and neither does lessons learned. Lesson learned happens throughout the project as well. But benefits realization is essential from a process that starts at the beginning. So I mentioned earlier strategic PMOs and whether PMOs of today versus those in the future are engaged at the beginning of the project. To me, benefits realization and value is absolutely essential, and the reason that we should engage project management and the professionals as far in the beginning of the project as possible, really before it's initiated. And some of the other practices for those are actually, I mentioned defining the accountability, but extend the responsibilities for integration to the project team. So all the value of a project or program happens after the project closes, right? That's when the value starts to be realized. The project team, if it doesn't have visibility after the turnover into, let's say, operations or manufacturing, there's no ability for the project team to track that. So there has to be a connection. There has to be an extension and integration and accountability that brings back the measurement of benefits so that the project and ultimately the success of that project can be measured. In many organizations, we know that doesn't happen. In mature organizations, it does, but I can tell you in all my conversations, it still remains an elusive ideal for organizations to achieve. And you can see the benefit of those that are actually have high maturity in benefits realization, I should say the performance versus those that have low maturity across all the traditional project metrics, time, budget, business intent, and forecasted ROI. You can see there's a significant premium for an organization to develop a mature focus on benefits realization. The value, we know in our Pulse of the Profession research, broadly we define organizations as high-performing versus low-performing. High-performing organizations risk 12 times less than low-performing organizations. So roughly 230 million for low-performing organizations per billion and 12 million per billion for high-performing. So there's a premium for success. I heard earlier today from NASA, a do more with less environment. Well, the private sector has been in that for a very long time. The public sector is also in a world where do more with less. And if there's always two arguments that typically take place in the public sector, and that is more revenue or less budget. But there's a third and equally important one, which is efficiency. And that is those things that we do fund, those things that we do initiate from a project and program standpoint, be more effective, be more efficient, and there will be more resources to provide for the funding of future activities and projects and programs that will lead to the benefits from those. So from a strategic initiative management and the PMO imperative, the PMOs have an opportunity to move from whatever state of maturity you are today. So if you're at the very low end of maturity, and many do acknowledge that they are, to somewhere in the middle, and perhaps you're even high performing as a PMO, you have the opportunity to move to a very different strategic level through the lens of those that are making decisions, setting the vision for the organization. From that vision, projects and programs are being implemented to ultimately deliver on those strategies or vision, and a PMO plays and can play an essential role. I had the opportunity to talk to one of our PMO leaders it's a global PMO, works in the aerospace and defense, and they at one point considered themselves highly mature, and I saw him at an aerospace and defense conference, and I asked him how it was going. He says, things are very good right now. He said, but I know that if I turn my eyes away, the maturity will leave more quickly than we ever achieved it. It'll be gone as if we never had it. So I need to remain focused on the project management maturity, the maturity of the project or program management office, ultimately to deliver value. And I think that in turn is a lesson for all of us. If we can implement this approach, if we can elevate project and program management in the organization, if we can realign the role of the PMO to be forward-thinking, aligned to strategy, then the organization itself will be more successful, and the PMO will be highly regarded by the leadership of the organization. And I'll leave you with this last quote. PMOs focus on actively supporting delivery of programs that drive maximum business value with minimum disruption to ongoing business operations. That is the PMO imperative. That's the PMO imperative in a strategic initiative management world. And it's a quote from our Thought Leadership series. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm, again, pleased and honored to have been with you today.